Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Miskatonic AV Club, a Mythos Busters production. I'm Sean, and joining me is my steadfast companion in card reviewing.
Hello there.
Missing tonight is my steadfast companion in everything else but card review, Scott. Unfortunately, his schedule we could just not work it out, and we really wanted to get this pushed out because we've been after this for a really long time to get the Dunwich reviews done, and people have been asking. So unfortunately, sacrifices had to be made. So sorry, Scott, we missed.
yeah, we're only a few months late. It's just a few, but the nice thing is, in a few years, when new players come and watch the videos, they won't even notice. So,
well, and that's true.
fun.
And the other advantage to this is we have now played the shit out of these cards.
That's true.
Versus a real quick turnaround where it's mostly first impressions and theory crafting. We have put the distance and the mileage on these cards.
There's 50% less pulling evaluations out of our ass.
Yes. Only 50?
There's still 50% of that. But
all right, so tonight we are, of course, getting on to reviewing the Survivor cards from the Dunwich Legacy expansion. So let's get to it. And in getting to it, we're going to talk about one of my favorite cards in this game thus far. Only second to Agnes is Duke. And with him, you get to play Ashcan Pete, which is kind of okay, too.
Sure.
So Ashcan Pete, or Duke, if you prefer, is our Survivor investigator. He has 4 willpower, 2 attack. Boy, we got into Lord of the Rings rhythm there for a moment. So it's 4 willpower, 2 intellect, 2 combat, 3 agility. As the Drifter trait, you begin the game with Duke in play, which might be the best ability on any investigator in the game. And free triggered action, discard a card from your hand, ready an asset you control, limit once per round. Elder Sign effect is +2, and ready Duke. And then he has 6 health and 5 sanity. So we can't talk Ashcan without talking Duke, of course, since you start with him in play. He makes Ashcan everything he is. So Duke is, of course, his signature asset. Is an ally, though doesn't cost an ally slot, which is important. 2 cost,
important.
No level ally creature traits, Ashcan Pete deck only. Action, exhaust Duke, fight. You attack with a base combat skill of 4. This attack deals +1 damage. And then another ability, spend an action, exhaust Duke, investigate. You investigate with the base intellect skill of 4. You may move to a connecting location immediately before investigating with this effect. Duke has 2 health, sanity. And rounding out the trio here, we've got Racked by Nightmares, which is, of course, the signature treachery. It's a weakness and madness. Revelation, exhaust all assets you control and put Racked by Nightmares in play in your threat area. Assets you control cannot ready. Spend 2 actions, discard Racked by Nightmares. Ian, thoughts?
he's a little bit good.
He's kind of okay.
I mean, everyone jokes about it in the community. You know, Ashcan is referred to as Duke more often than Ashcan for a reason, because that's really what makes this investigator worth it. And the thing is, like, most investigators have one ability, right? Usually a special ability and then an Elder Sign ability. But really with Duke, he's giving you 2 things at once. The ability to fight. Actually, 3 things at once. The ability to fight, a free move action with the Investigate, and then the Investigate with, a base skill of 4. So you're kind of getting like a weapon. You're getting a high Investigate value. You're getting a free move. There's a reason why people go on and on about Ashcan and Duke.
And all for the low cost of just splitting your health and sanity up between Ashcan and Duke. So Ashcan's, base stats are just a little bit lower, but you get and even if Duke did not start in play and this was just a 2-cost ally, oh my god, I would pay 6 for this guy and any other investigator.
Yeah.
What the hell? Duke is just so good.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know. We've talked about what kind of survivors do in particular, and I don't think so far anyway that you can say like for Guardian they fight, or for or not Mystic, for Seeker they investigate. Like Survivor's just one of those weird ones that's kind of all over the place, and with 4 starting willpower and then effectively 4 base value to fight or to actual combat tests, to fight tests as it were, and investigate action. I mean, just it doesn't get more well-rounded than that.
Yeah.
Even Jenny
Yeah.
blushes.
Well, let's not go crazy now, but no, even with my love for Jenny, I can objectively look at Ashcan and Duke and just if there's like a newer player to the game or someone who's struggling with true solo, like I would immediately tell them Ashcan is your go-to solo investigator if you kind of just want to play the scenarios, enjoy the story, and not worry about getting wrecked too often. Like that's how good Ashcan is. He's balanced, that will give you a fighting chance against most scenarios, even going into them blindly. Um, so that's definitely like his niche. Not that he's not good in multiplayer, but just he has that balance that really works well in solo.
Yeah, and he's good in multiplayer, but he's ultimately, I mean, you can swap some cards here and there to maybe have him lean more fighty or more investigate, but just by default, he's just a utility player.
Mm-hmm.
So that's useful in multiplayer if that's kind of the way everyone's going. But if you need a specialist, then you kind of can be that. But I don't know. I don't know that I'd choose him as a specialist build.
Right. Yeah. I guess it's worth mentioning the potential weaknesses for Ashcan. There's not many, but it's worth talking about. One of them is he is reliant on Duke. So if there are, for whatever reason, a scenario takes out Duke, you have to sacrifice him to protect Ashcan, then Ashcan definitely gets hobbled without the help of his loyal hound.
Yeah, he's a little rough by himself, because then he's got the high willpower, so sure he's a little resilient against maybe treacheries and counter deck and those kind of willpower tests, but 2 intellect and 2 combat by itself, that's a rough go.
Yeah, it's kind of like that's why it's good to make sure you have some allies or meat shields in your Ashcan deck, just to provide a little bit of a buffer, so Duke's not having to take too much and ultimately get sacrificed.
So what do you think to the people who say that Ashcan and Duke are broken? Because I've heard more than a few people. I've seen maybe a couple comments on the subreddit, and I think I might have seen something on the FFG forums where people just kind of feel that well-roundedness and kind of early game just dependability makes him too powerful. You think that's the case?
It's a hard one. We're going to talk about another investigator who gets accused of that once we get to the seeker cards. um, it's hard for me to make the leap to broken, like overpowered maybe, broken no, because like in this game, if you are just sailing through, then you can just, and we have the higher difficulty levels baked in, like ramp it up to expert and see how you do with Ashcan. That's already baked into the game. That's the nice thing about it. To me, broken in a card game means something like, sometimes in the Lord of the Rings, the card game, we'd get these crazy loopy decks that would just like completely make it not even worth to play the game because you'd win the game turn 1. Like that to me is broken. Something like this is potentially overpowered. Like maybe it's more powerful than it should be on standard, but I wouldn't go so far as broken.
Yeah, that's about where I'm at. I mean, I recognize how extremely powerful he is, and you know what? I've grown from my LCG infancy. I was one of those people who was kind of constantly screaming for balance, and like every investigator should be about as good as every other investigator, or not investigator. Obviously, wasn't around at this game wasn't around at that time, but maybe in Netrunner, like I'd always get salty that the ID I wanted to play was not as powerful as the other ones that were out there. But
Mm.
I'm kind of more and more getting around to the idea, especially for a co-op game. I don't know that I still feel this way for competitive. But in a co-op game, I don't mind a bit of power disparity. Just like, let's just not pretend it's the same thing to take Ashcan solo through the
Right.
Dunwich Legacy versus Daisy solo through the Dunwich Legacy. Bear that in mind when we talk about it in context.
Right. And I think that's a good point. Like, if this was a competitive game, then yeah, I'd probably say it is broken because Ashcan would outclass some other investigators, at least in solo, easily. But it's almost like in a cooperative game, variety is better. Like, I think it's kind of a good thing to have an investigator that, like I said, someone who's newer to the game or struggling with solo can pick up and not feel like they're just getting smashed. And then it's good that we have some that are not as equipped for solo or multiplayer, whatever the case may be, because it gives you a variety of challenges, things to work with, instead of just kind of artificially trying to keep everything the same.
Yeah, I'd agree.
The other thing I wanted to mention about Ashcan is, well, there's a couple things. One is that one thing you
we
do.
didn't really cover his deck building, did we?
Oh no, we did not.
You want to run us through that real quick and then finish
Sure.
your thought?
So yeah, sure. Standard deck size of 30. You can access survivor cards all levels, neutral cards all levels, and like the other Dunwich investigators, he can pick up to 5 level 0 cards from any other class. You include Duke, of course, who starts in play, racked by nightmares, and 1 random basic. So pretty much the same we've seen for the other Dunwich investigators.
Tell us about Dookie.
So a couple thoughts. So one thing you do have to keep in mind if we're thinking about weaknesses, or maybe more so limitations, I should say, is that obviously Duke exhausts to fight. So you can fight with him, deal 2 damage to an enemy, but if it's an enemy that has more than that, maybe 3 or 4 hit points, then you're either going to have to use Ashcan's ability to ready Duke, or you're going to have another weapon around to finish the job.
Yeah, so talking on that subject, then I think Ashcan was really the investigator that made me come around to the scavenging card.
Mm-hmm.
Now knowing what I know about it, I regret missing it for Wendy, but I feel like it works better for Ashcan. So Survivor, obviously you've got that loop that you can exploit, or not exploit, just use. So between newspapers, flashlights, whatever you happen to be using, my favorite is magnifying glass and rabbit's foots. Basically, you can either keep cards coming back to your hand to fuel tests as you would with a normal scavenging build, or with Ashcan you have the alternate ability to ready Duke. And what's really fun is you can, in a scavenging build, say I've got Duke investigating on a location, I have scavenging out, I can pitch my rabbit's foot mid-test to ready Duke, and if I succeed by 2 or more, pull it back. Now, clarify, you can't do that if you're actually adding the card to the skill test, because they kind of remain in limbo until everything's resolved.
Right.
But as far as discarding a card to ready Duke, that's one of my favorite tricks, is to chuck an item for an investigate test and then immediately scavenge it back, and it's like a free action for Duke just by exhausting scavenging.
Right. Well, one of the spaces that I haven't really explored much with Ashcan is actually using his ability to discard a card to ready an asset for something other than Duke. Like, it's interesting. They could have easily just worded it like discard a card from your hand, ready Duke.
Mm-hmm.
But they give you that flexibility. I haven't really explored what you could do with that. Unfortunately, the cards that I could really think of that would be nice for that, like say a Pathfinder or some other cards that exhaust, he doesn't have access to. You could potentially like ready scavenging or burglary to do that multiple times. I'm trying to think of what other ones would be good for that.
Pickpocketing.
Pickpocketing.
Or is that
Forbidden knowledge if you want a bunch of it does, I believe, yeah.
Yeah, and forbidden knowledge, that's a good one. Yeah, I don't know. And okay, so what's your favorite splash with Ashcan currently? What are your 5 splashes?
Hmm, that's a good question.
So
I tend.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Well,
No,
if
go
you've
for it.
got him, all right. Well, all right. So right now, if I'm not leaning him, more investigative versus more fighty, I go two magnifying glasses because I'm normally playing scavenging because it's so good. And magnifying glass also helps on top of Duke's normal bonus, so just double awesome with scavenging. Then I normally go two vicious blows because dealing 3 damage with Duke is pretty awesome. And then, as with all my Dunwich investigators, I run one elusive.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely a good one. For Pete, I the kind of the build I've been going with is using some of the seeker cards and just emphasizing the movement aspect or speed. So my goal with Ashcan is basically to just tear through scenarios as fast as possible. So to that end, I've used shortcut to just move around quickly, and working a hunch to quickly grab a clue instead of having to investigate for it. So the interesting there is that's kind of emphasizing what he's good at instead of covering for his weaknesses. So really the goal
Wait,
there
does he
is
have
just to
weaknesses? Did I miss something?
good, good point. But really the goal is just to scramble through and get through a scenario before it can do anything bad to you, which is, he's gotten through every scenario without really a hitch. So seems to be working fine.
Hmm. So, how do you feel about racked by nightmares as a weakness? How have you found the experience to be?
Um, I want to say overall that it's not as bad as some other weaknesses that I've encountered. Like obviously that the assets get exhausted, which sucks for Duke, and they can't ready. But in that case, Ashken is usually running far ahead enough of the game that he can spend those two actions to just get rid of it.
Yeah, that was gonna be my instinct as well. Is that he's just so good at keeping pace and so good at the early game where he's on the board, ready to go, ready to do stuff from turn one. That two actions is not a too big a deal. The one thing I will say is getting this, say, mid turn when you're just drawing versus getting it in the upkeep phase. I think this is two different treacheries.
Right.
Because if you
Yeah.
draw it during your turn, maybe you'll have the actions to get rid of it, maybe not. But at least you'll know what's going on heading into the next turn, and you can hopefully adjust for it. Versus getting it in the upkeep phase when it's completely unexpected. Everything you have starts exhausted, moving into the next turn. But you can always use, and I think that's the big thing, is Ashcan's free triggered ability to discard a card, ready an asset. Like, he's ready to fight his own signature weakness just straight there.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so Ashcan, or rather Duke. Yeah, he's such a good boy. I don't know. I'm never sad to see him on the board, and I'm never sad to play with him.
Nope. Yeah.
Okay, so moving from one amazing red card to another, you want to read us our big bombastic ally that we get in Dunwich?
Sure. So this is Peter Sylvester. This is a 3 cost asset. He's the big man on campus. Um, he has the willpower icon. Allied Miskatonic traded. You get +1 agility reaction after your turn ends. You heal 1 horror from Peter Sylvester, and he has 1 health and 2 sanity, and of course takes up an ally slot. So he's basically, we talk about investigators being tanks, but he is like an ally tank. That's his role,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
He literally exists to soak and heal horror.
Yep.
Dude, and particularly his leveled up version, might be my favorite ally in the game. That's a very contentious spot, but I'm thinking he's up there. Um, he's Agnes's boyfriend first and foremost, so everyone else back
Oh
off.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, for
and
sure.
and I think like anyone else who can take him, or anyone else who can, I guess, include him. How sad are you to see him? It's not sad at all. Just all that horror. One per turn, gone.
Yeah. I mean he just provides a lot, beyond even just the healing of horror, which is so, compared to all the other healing effects, like this is the best, and the fact it just does it over and over.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even have to do anything. The turn ends and you just get to heal one from him. And you also get the +1 agility. The static boosts are always really, really good on allies. And then he only costs 3. I'd pay more for him for
Yep.
sure.
And everyone who can take him loves that agility. Ashcan,
Yep.
Ashcan likes it because then that basically puts him at all 4s. For normal purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Wendy loves it, of course, because she's our dodge tank.
Yep.
And Agnes loves it because that puts her at a solid 4, and all of a sudden, evading and then blasting enemies in the face becomes a lot more attractive when you're sitting at a 4 to start with. So
Yeah.
so good. Just
Yeah.
so good.
Definitely one of the best.
So
Best
also,
allies around.
yeah, he's. So also bear in mind that, and I always get this wrong, whether it's painkillers. Painkillers works particularly well with Pete Sylvester. He's an athlete who thought it. But the ability to heal a damage and take a horror, and then immediately heal that horror off, just so good.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's certain scenarios that tend to, certain treacheries and counter cards we've seen here and there that tend to like ping you like one horror here, one horror there, and if you have Peter around, then he can just kind of that just nullifies it basically.
Yep. All right. Now you thought it couldn't get any better. I feel like it's about to.
Yep. So this is the senior year version of Peter Sylvester. When he's the even bigger man on campus. He's got his letter. So same cost. He's a level 2 this time. You get +1 agility and +1 willpower this time. It still has the same ability of healing 1 horror when your turn ends, but now he has 3 sanity to work with.
So 3 cost for 2 static boosts. Like full stop right there, I'd probably do it.
Yep. Yeah, that would be worth the cost right there.
On top of that, he gets his awesome horror sponging. Just so good.
Yeah.
This is a must play in an Agnes deck. I mean, even if you're going full on spells, then this just frees up the accessory spot from the Holy Rosary. You don't need that. You don't need to go up to 7 guys. It's not that big a deal. Like, it's a perfectly acceptable place to sit.
Yep. And for Ashcan, the nice thing is that this, like, Duke is helping him with his intellect and combat, and then you throw in level 2 Peter, and he's augmenting the other 2 stats, the agility and willpower, kind of the off stats. So then basically with this and Duke, Ashcan is in a really good spot.
The Adventures of Pete and Pete. I know like 6 people have made that deck list already, but
yeah,
for those of us who remember those wacky gingers as a kid. Yeah, I don't know. I can't gush enough. He's probably my favorite ally in the
And level 2 again, the cost is low. The experience cost for the upgraded version is low. There's really not too much bad to say about him.
And the hits just keep on coming. So I'm gonna go ahead and profess that when I first saw this card, I was pretty not crazy excited about it. And I still think that it's not an amazing card for everyone, but I think it could be an amazing card for anyone. And that is, of course, Fire Axe, which is our survivor asset. 1 cost, level 0. It has a fight pip, takes up 1 hand slot, has the item, weapon, and melee traits. Action, fight. If you have no resources in your resource pool, This attack deals +1 damage. Free triggered action. During an attack using Fire Axe, spend 1 resource. Get +2 combat for this. Limit 3 times per attack. So, you could have a base fight, or combat rather, of 0. And as long as you've got the resources to spend, still be in a completely fine place to hit just about anything.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, maxing out at +6 to anyone is just ridiculous.
And
go
on.
I would say in general, like the Fire Axe takes the most kind of finesse of any weapon in the game to use it correctly.
Yeah, because you kind of have to be comfortable hovering at or around 1 to 2 resources, maybe 3 if you're taking a big swing at something. Because like we've said many times, most of the time, at least when I'm using a weapon, when I'm taking a weapon, when I'm intending to use a weapon, it's for the action compression, for the extra damage.
Mm-hmm.
What was cool about this is you kind of have the flexibility. So say you've got 3 resources and you're sitting at, combat, something like that. You kind of have some interesting choices to make, because you could do 3 separate tests at 1 damage, the first 2 at 1 damage, then the last one at +1 damage, and each of those is at +2. You could do a giant swing all at once to have 1 big test at +2, or you can kind of like mix it up from there. And I don't know, Team Fire Axe, man. I it's not for everyone, but it works so well for those that take it in, as long as you're kind of keying around that, being able to hover around 0 resource.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the cards that has the most shenanigans potential for those players who like that kind of thing. There's potential for kind of the ones that often come up are if you have some of the talents out, then what you can do is potentially use those to drain some of your resources as well if you need to get to 0 resources for whatever reason. There's also the option of, if you're running Mystic with Forbidden Knowledge, or if the Dunwich Gators can access that as well, then you can, drain down to no resources, do your Fire Axe with extra damage, get a resource with Forbidden Knowledge, and then spend the resource you get for the second action, and then you get the the +2 damage again. So
my solo Agnes build has had several games where I don't see a single Shriveling or Song of the Dead. I see none of my offensive spells. But if I see a Fire Axe and a Forbidden Knowledge, I'm good. I'm good, man. Because you can say you start the turn with Forbidden Knowledge and Fire Axe out, and you've got 2 resources. Well, you swing in for 6, spend your resources down. Probably going to hit it for 2 damage. Well, and then you Forbidden Knowledge a resource over, take a horror with Agnes, and then deal another damage out. And then if the thing's still not dead, then you can take another 4-shot swing, and hopefully you've got, a pip or something you can throw from your hand. And Agnes is dealing out like 6 damage in 2 actions.
Yep. Yeah. It's pretty crazy in that build. There's just so much potential, different things you can do with it.
I've also seen this card specifically hold solo Rex builds up pretty well, because again, Rex, if you kind of got that quick back and forth resource play where you can get down to 0, or even if you don't, like the ability to just go from 2 fight or 2 combat up to a potential 8 combat if you need it by spending resources, like that by itself, that's mind over matter right there. Better than mind over matter if you have the resources.
Yeah, totally. I think that was kind of my trajectory with this card. When I first saw it, I liked it. I tried playing it in a few builds, and I kind of was more lukewarm on it because I got stuck in some situations where I just couldn't get the resources off or didn't want to, and then you're stuck like not dealing the damage you want and wasting actions. But then ultimately, I saw the potential both in kind of those crazy like Agnes or talent builds, but also just even in my Rex 2-handed build, often he doesn't need to do fighting, but I include it because there are cases where he needs to run in and help out, and Fire Axes helps him. And a lot of times it doesn't even matter if he does that extra damage. It's more so just that he can chip in and do like 1 or 2 damage here to finish off an enemy, and you spend that conversion of 1 resource for +2 combat is a really good deal. And it lets Rex turn into, you know, a super fighter when he needs to be, or whoever the investigator may be, who's usually more of a clue finder.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a nice, like, even when I'll get my shriveling out, say I've got this in Agnes or anyone else who got another means of dealing damage. Yeah, or even for Ashcan, say he uses his Duke, doesn't feel like chucking any of his cards from his hand to discard to ready Duke. Thing's only got 1 damage left on it, or say, I'm trying to think who would be like Guardian Survivor, whatever the case might be. Say you use a shot on a shriveling or a 45. Thing's got 1 health left, and you've got 1 shot left on your shriveling or 45. You always have that moment where you're like, oh, I waste the excess damage? I don't wanna. But if you've got Fire Axe on the board, it's just like, yeah, okay, I'll just chuck a couple of resources at it essentially and get the thing done.
Yeah, I know we've definitely talked about how odd enemies with odd numbers of hit points are the most annoying things in the game. So Fire Axe helps with that for sure.
So yeah, Team Fire Axe.
Yep.
Well, all right. Now, everything that we've discussed so far is a clear winner. I'm still not 100% sure how to feel on the last card, Ian. You want to read that one for us?
Yeah. Okay. So this is Bait and Switch. It's a 1-cost event, has an intellect and agility icons. It has the trick trait. It lets you do an evade action if you succeed, if the enemy is not only evade the enemy and move it to a connecting location. So basically turning your regular evade action to letting you move the enemy somewhere else in addition to evading it.
For whom do you think that's worth it?
Well, I have to be honest and admit to include this in a deck. So that limits my experience a bit. In theory, it's one of those cards where in theory I really like it, and there's probably situations in a game where I would look and be like, I wish I had Bait and Switch, but in practice, other cards tend to be more generally useful. Basically, the ideal situation you want with this is obviously you're at a location where you're trying to do something, whether it's gathering clues or, you know, finishing off a parlay to recruit a story asset, something like that, and you just need to get the enemy away from you so you can finish doing that. It's evaded, so even if it has Hunter, that means it's gonna give you at least a turn to have some breathing room before it comes back. Something like that.
Yeah. I'm thinking, like, Wendy, maybe? She's the only one where I've ever included this, because I'm trying to think. I mean, like, any of the Dunwich investigators who could take this, I mean, this isn't something you splash for, I don't think. Ashcan doesn't need it. Agnes doesn't need it. So that really just leaves us with Wendy, who, you know, I think there's probably something to be said. If she's camped out trying to investigate, not set up for combat, which quite often not be set up for combat, then yeah. For 1 cost and an evade, moving it away, totally fine with that. I think the one thing that really diminishes the potential value of this card is the Hunter keyword. Because if you do this to a Hunter enemy, then you've bought yourself little time.
Yeah.
Considering this itself costs you an action.
Yeah, it's sometime, but not. It's highly situation dependent, I guess. It's probably more useful if it's just like you said, Wendy. She wants ways to deal with enemies other than fighting them. She can, you know, move an enemy without Hunter somewhere else, potentially somewhere she's not going to go back to, and then it just sits there and she doesn't have to worry about it.
The only other thing I can think of is if you've got, you know, a multiplayer game going on and put this in deck of an investigator who is really, really specialized to investigate, but who could also stand, to do a decent evade test. You could maybe push that enemy to the location of one of your compatriots who's better positioned to deal with it. Like if you push that guy at Zoe, I feel like that's pretty okay.
Yeah. Or set up the dream scenario of pushing it away and then someone dynamites.
There you go. Well,
Like,
hey, both dynamite and bait and switch can be taken by any Dunwich investigator, so someone make the dream happen.
yeah. I mean, the more we talk about it, the more I'm thinking for some investigators, particularly Wendy, or some of the less fighty investigators, maybe it might be worth throwing one in and seeing how many times you use it.
Yeah, I don't see this as a 2 of.
No.
Maybe. I don't know. If you're going like the complete pacifist route, maybe. But I could just see me having this in my hand and an elite enemy starts harassing me and I'm like, oh, well, I'm sad now.
Yeah. It's probably dependent on map too. If there's certain maps that are more linear, like it would be helpful to just push an enemy behind you, the location further towards the start, and then you don't have to worry about it. I mean, because the thing is, usually what would happen is you'd evade the enemy and then move to the next location. But this basically gives you the room to, if you're not done doing whatever you needed to do there, which does happen quite often.
Now, is this a Migo in this art?
I believe so.
Looks like
Yeah.
he's about to give that guy a massage. Battling up behind him. Let me know if the pressure's too much.
I think someone pulled the Hobbit trick from Lord of the Rings, where they put the pillows there, and you just hear the Nazgul scream.
Oh. All right, well, that's the Survivor set from Dunwich. What say you about it as a whole?
Overall, it's super solid. I mean, I'm one of the best investigators in the game, one of the best allies in the game. It's hard to say for the weapon because there's lots of good weapons, but I'd say it's among definitely one of the better weapons of the game. Bait and switch is maybe a weak link, but I don't think it's a bad card. I think it has uses for sure. So I think
Has
Survivor,
uses, but they are few.
yeah, Survivor made out well in this expansion for sure.
Sure did. Yeah, and yeah, I'll definitely echo what you said earlier. That anyone who's frustrated with the game or kind of want to get a handle on what it means to be well-rounded for true solo, like I can't think of anyone better than Duke. Like Jenny's pretty well-rounded, but I don't think she's quite as easy to pilot.
Yeah, that's fair.
Not that Duke plays himself by any stretch, because there's still some crazy shenanigans to be had, but yeah. And just being a dog person, like it warms my heart. But the one thing, okay, so I wanted to bring this up when we were talking about Ashcan, but it's just as good to bring it up now, I suppose. Doesn't it make you a little sad that all investigators don't start with their signature in play?
Yes, it does. It definitely does.
Like
I mean,
how much better?
I'm trying to imagine now. Yeah.
Like how much? And I know the game's not meant to account for that. And this is, what if the game was meant to account for that? We and we being Nick and I and our friend group that we were playing with tried out a house rule the last time we fired up the Dunwich Legacy. And that house rule was you get to start with your signature card in your opening hand, but you cannot mulligan.
That's
Yeah, and it worked out all right. It was cool because, I'm trying to remember who I was playing. It wasn't as much a boon to me because I was just playing Daisy, and I don't think she has enough tomes yet to really make her signature be worth anything other than the icons for the most part.
right. There's actually quite a few investigators.
Oh, sorry, say that again. Oh, Ian, did I lose you? I have a feeling it's gonna come. Oh, Ian, I lost you. Oh no. It's all right, we'll get you back. I promise. All right, well, that being said, Survivor cards, yeah, I will just echo what Ian said. Definitely amazing. They got a really nice set. Ashcan's amazing. Duke's even better. So if you haven't tried them out yet, definitely do. And so I think we'll wrap this one up. And of course, you can always check us out at our regular podcast. We've got our YouTube channel, our Twitch channel, our Facebook, our Twitter, and check out our blog at wordpress.mythosbusters.com. So, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time to review the secret cards of Dunwich Legacy on the Miskatonic AV Club.